the Bogus Otis Show. It's the only podcast dedicated to my buddy Sammy. Sammy Hagar, that is. What is understood need to be discussed, especially if it's about Sammy Hagar. Yeah.
We can change the world. We got to change the way we think about it. And while you're at it, think about this, our friends and listening audience. You've come to the right place for some riffing on fun. Why? Because we are the world's only dedicated Sammy Hagar podcast. This is the Bogus Otis Show. I am Bohost Brent. That is Bohost Darin. And tonight is all about the foot.
16 years of the foot. Can you believe that?
I'm starting to feel my age. Let's just leave it at that.
That is crazy, right?
We'll move on to happier subjects.
Yeah. So this album can drive 55 if it so chooses.
Yeah, it sure can. I think it can actually probably break a few speed limits is the honest fact of the matter, which is okay by me. So tonight, look, we're on a bit of a path, and maybe it's a path that is like, little chicken feet in the sand down the beach. It leads us back to 2008, really, which was the early origins of this supergroup. And we know that Sammy and his pals were on the cusp of something I think we can all agree was pretty big at that point in time. Was it the right time? Was it the right circumstance? Was it the right players? You know this about supergroups. Often they're very short-lived. Often they're overhyped. Often they don't live up to, the billing that we think maybe they could or should be. But something special came along in 2008 and leading into 2009, the release of the first Chickenfoot. And I do think it had to do with the right mix of players that were at the table, so to speak. So cast your mind back, D, like what when you first started to get a little inkling that there was something wicked this way coming, what were you thinking? What were you anticipating?
Well, it kind of came out of nowhere, right? Like I remember this came quickly on the heels, almost in a negative sense, that it kind of stood on cosmic universal fashion, right? And Sammy did a quick summer tour for that. I remember seeing that. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we have this Chickenfoot. Kind of like the way he dropped that Fortune Teller Blues out of nowhere. Now all of a sudden we have, which I thought was awesome because as much as I like cosmic universal fashion, I was kind of like, Van Halen had reunited with Roth. Different Kind of Truth had now come out and kind of gone, and they were kind of back together. And I kind of felt like this was like the classic rock answer to Audioslave. Like some kick-ass classic rock era, like, we'll show you what's up, Audioslave. Boom, Sammy, Satch, Mikey, and Chad Smith. I was like, okay, I'm back in. Because I was, I loved Cosmic Universal Fashion, but I didn't think it was the strongest. But when this came out, man, I was like back in big time. What about you?
Yeah, I would say Cosmic for me was not good, not bad, just different. And it was hard for me to kind of get a read on that album. And I think honestly, it probably started with the title track. It was a very different groove and vibe. And to see the transition happen so quickly, to go from that into what became the first Chickenfoot album, I think it kind of took us by surprise in a good way. And if you think about it, totally. let's take Cosmic Universal Fashion out of the mix for a second here and just pretend it didn't happen. Then Chickenfoot is essentially both Chickenfoot albums in that time frame of about 3 years roughly. It was bookended by Living It Up, which was beach flip flops, easygoing acoustic guitar, chilled vibes. And then on the other end of that bookend was Light Roast. Again, stripped down, acoustic, chilled stuff.
That's right.
And in the middle, smack dab in the middle of it, to your point, you get like this classic hard rock revival. Like, hey, if you thought I was, kidding around and I was going to retire on the beach. I'm not done
Yeah,
yet.
it was kind of like in my opinion, it was like an answer to Audio Slave, like the classic rock answer to Audio Slave, but also like, hey, Van Halen, we'll show you how it's done
Yeah.
because they were back, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you think about the gap in time with no new Van Halen music, and especially in that time frame, Van Halen toured with Roth 2007, 2008, kind of a year or so prior to
Yep.
Chickenfoot, and then again in 2012, immediately
Yep.
after Chickenfoot. So again,
Yep.
you've also got two Van Halen Roth tours bookending
Yeah,
Chickenfoot.
it's like the strange inversion of Eat 'em and Smile with Van Halen on that one, and then the Van Hagar with Satch almost like it's like this dueling competitiveness again with you know in reverse.
Yeah, yeah, really, really true. And I think, it was special for a whole bunch of reasons, and not the least of which, it rocked and the songs were
Did rock,
fantastic.
right?
And I remember it first. I'll use the word dripping out, and that is in particular around Down the Drain. You probably remember
Yeah, I
there
love
was
it.
a
I love it.
Chickenfoot website that kind of emerged out of nowhere, and they had some little teeny tiny teaser audio clips. And the very first one that was on the homepage of this, what became this Chickenfoot website, was a little snippet of Down the Drain that was just like dirty grinding, and we were like,
I love that song.
what is happening?
I
Right?
love that song. I'm in fact the last minute in my mind is better than most albums,
Yeah.
right? And his scream at the end is like it's off the
No, it's
rails.
no, it's epic. It's absolutely epic. And I think, again, no disrespect to what Van Halen was doing on the bookends of the Chickenfoot time, because both of them, by all accounts, successful tours, digging deep in the vault, playing a lot of deep cuts and stuff that they maybe never had played live, or at least certainly
Yeah.
hadn't since the late 70s. So both of those tours very successful, and I think the energy and the vibe was pretty cool. I caught the 2012 tour at Scotiabank Arena or Air Canada Centre, whatever it was called at the time, in Toronto. It was actually on St. Patrick's Day in
I remember
2012
that.
when they played there.
Again,
And
I bet you we were 10 feet from each other, right?
I was in the second row, almost dead center, and I
Oh,
was
okay. I
like,
was not anywhere near you then.
okay, and I'm like blown away, fantastic. But it still, to me, didn't feel like it had the energy that we saw on the tour that followed that first Chickenfoot album. Small venues, little stage, tiny little stage. I mean, Chad's drum riser was not that far back from the edge of the stage, and it was kind of like they just said, we are going to give classic hard driving rock a kick in the ass that it needs.
Should we try and
Right.
break the internet right now? I have a
Well, I
question
think
that could break the internet.
we've done it a few times, so why not?
Which album do you choose more often? The Chickenfoot debut or Different Kind of Truths to listen to?
Oh, that's an easy one. It's Chickenfoot,
Yeah, me
before I
too.
even
Me
get
too.
out of bed.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
You know, I just felt as much. And look, when Different Kind of Truth came out, I was hardcore into it, played it nonstop.
Yep.
But I think when Chickenfoot came out, I'm like, no, this is the fun. This is the fun. Right? I felt like Different Kind of Truth was just maybe a little bit too heavy and too. The fun had kind of.
Well,
It
what's
wasn't.
the
It wasn't
opposite?
danceable.
What's
It
the
wasn't
opposite of
danceable.
fun? Serious, right? And
Yeah.
it was a little serious. And the
Yeah.
only dancing that happened, from a danceable factor was, I think, Roth on that tour had that little sort of square piece on the stage that he would, kind of slide around on a little
Yeah.
bit, which was very cool. But you're right. It was kind of a bit dark, a bit heavy, a bit moody.
Yeah.
And I love that you said fun, because we always come back to Live Without a Net and 5150 as being kind of the gold standard for having fun on stage. And I think you're right. With this Chickenfoot album and the tour, the music also was pretty heavy,
Yeah.
pretty riff rocking.
Yeah.
But they were having fun. The
And
fun
they had
factor,
Anthony on background vocals, right? So
fun
the
factor
epic,
was back.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh,
Now
I
here's
thought the
what's
songs were shorter, just punchier. I thought they were just punchier, a little bit rawer.
yeah.
Of course, Eddie's Eddie and Satch is Satch. I wasn't really comparing those two. I just felt like overall, like when I want a fun vibe, which album am I going to reach for? Well, it was
Yeah.
Chickenfoot,
Yeah.
and then
I
Chickenfoot
think
again.
no, I think it's a very probably in the end unfair comparison for that reason. And it doesn't say anything disparaging about a different kind of truth. It was just a different kind of album at the end of the
Yeah, like
day,
if you
right?
compare "Oh Yeah" to "Tattoo," I mean,
Yeah. Now, Tattoo is probably one of my favorite songs on that
I
album.
like it too. But I mean,
Was fun. That was a fun tune, and it was pretty
yeah.
upbeat for sure. So I've been doing this the last few episodes we've recorded, going back into the magazine archives, and
Oh,
here's
I got that
guitar
one.
player,
But first of
guitar
all, can I ask if
player.
you are you wearing a Chickenfoot shirt? I can't really see.
Yeah.
Tell us
Oh
what you're
yeah,
wearing.
yeah, yeah. Today I'm wearing my
Oh,
Chicken Head. It's
is
the Chicken
is
Head
that a rare one?
fan
Where'd you
club.
get that? Oh, wow.
I got this at one of the shows. I can't recall if it was, in fact, at the Mod Club in Toronto or at the docks down on the waterfront.
Bet you
Um,
that was Mod Club because I went. I
but
didn't go to that one, and I would have bought that for sure. I
yeah,
love
so they had a package. Whatever ticket package you bought, you got this. And so instead of it saying Chicken Foot under the logo, it says Chicken
Chicken Head.
Head,
Yeah,
and then it's got a little fan club on the sleeve. So
awesome, awesome. Yeah, because
yeah,
the Docs. I don't think the Docs had that. It just had like they had the kind of like the more standard concert shirts, right?
the regular touring ones.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah. So I go back to this magazine, Guitar Player, September
Oh, nine.
2009.
Yep.
September 2009. And there's a cover story. It says Joe Satriani, Sammy Hagar, Chickenfoot saves riff rock is what's on the cover. And if I go to the story itself, which also we'll have to post a picture of this when the episode goes up. Look at that badass picture with Sammy and Joe right
Okay.
there. Looks
So thanks for saying that. I thought
yeah,
they looked awesome. Like I thought Sammy had a pair of shades that
yeah.
kind of were like huge, almost like Nirvana wraparounds that I thought
They're
fit them
yeah, a
so
little bit
well, man.
like the Fly Bono U2.
Yeah,
A little
I
bit
thought
like
they
that.
actually just looked cool as a group,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah,
thought
they do.
Chad Smith brought some youth cred from, being kind of the generation after Sammy and Van Halen. I thought it was cool that he was in the band. So when I would tell my friends, they're like, "What? This band is half Chili Peppers?" That kind of brought a new interest amongst friends of mine who may not have been into Van Halen, right? Or
Yes.
Sammy. We're like, "What? Who's
Yeah.
this? I got to check this out," right? So I was
Yeah.
proud to be saying that.
Yeah.
Uh, I thought they
Well,
looked awesome.
and Chad Smith, I mean, badass drummer in his own right. That guy can, hold his own
Yeah,
with most anybody on stage. There's no
yeah.
doubt. So I want to just read you the title of this article from this Guitar Player, September 2009, is called Birdland for obvious reasons, and it says. Chickenfoot may be one hell of a silly name for a band, but Joe and Sammy are dead serious about their Flock's Riffin' and Rockin' debut album. So this says to me, it's interesting. I didn't know that you were going to say what you did about the fun factor and make some of those comparisons. And I guess it is, again, we're very simpatico wavelength with so much of this stuff. I pulled this book and I looked at it and I was like, I love how they're presenting this. It's serious, but we're gonna have fun at the same time.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's some monster songs. Actually, when I first got it, I couldn't get past Down the Drain. I mean, I was stuck on that song for probably 2 weeks before I could even explore the rest of the album.
Well, here's a comparison again, and we love to draw these dotted lines or these parallels between songs and between albums, and probably no surprise because this Chickenfoot disc is produced by Andy Johns. So let's draw the line back, Andy Johns, all the way to For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, and
right.
you think about some of the heavy riffs on the Carnal Knowledge album, like Judgment Day is a great example. And you think about fast forward back again to 2009 and a Down the Drain. And it's no surprise that this return to classic hard rock also has that influence there that is Andy Johns. And it's interesting in this story as well. He basically says, the guys, as they were recording, kept doing more and more takes of certain songs and certain pieces. And in the interview in the magazine, at one point, he's quoted as basically saying like, um, "Yeah, I was like reached a point where I said, you guys do 50 takes of it if you want. I'm going outside to have a smoke because that one that you just did, that's the one we're using. So I don't care if you want to play it 10 more times."
And you're right.
So,
They there's a jam factor to this one that I liked a lot better
mm,
than Different Kind of Truth. I felt Different Kind of Truth just sonically sounded very kind of grating. I wasn't a big fan of Eddie's tone at that point. I mean, it sounded good. It was a nicely polished record, but I think the sound that Andy Johns brought to Chickenfoot, plus with Satch joining the brand, he brought along Mike Frazier, who we've had on the show and we're going to have on again. He gave
yeah.
it kind of an extra kind of little shine to it as well. So I think that the combination of Andy Johns and Mike Frazier really gave this album, in my opinion, the sonic upper hand than Different Kind of Truth.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It did have that sort of heavy bottom end that was a bit scary almost and powerful in how the sound came across, right?
And it was
Uh,
unrehearsed too, right? I think Different Kind of Truth felt a little bit overproduced, whereas Down the Drain was like one take, and they're talking through parts of it, and it's all. It had Van
yeah,
Halen one kind of just like he's gonna switch from the rhythm into the lead now, and there's no rhythm guitar at that point, right?
yeah. No, you raise a really good point, and I think you're right. Um, there is something to be said for maybe a little less polish and not overproducing and keeping it kind of live and raw. And when we saw them play live on the
Yeah.
subsequent tour, that also came across. It was very almost off the cuff, live on the floor. We're doing
Like let's
this,
just put
right?
these four monsters in a room and hit record.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I
Yeah,
thought it was great, man. I thought they looked good. They were still in prime form. They still are, but I mean, they were what? Sammy was what, 61, 62 maybe?
yeah.
It was like the perfect timing as well, and I love that was the answer to Different Kind of Truth. So is the DLR podcast? Are they no longer going to accept our phone calls after we?
It's funny. I just tried to send a text message to
They
them,
bounce
and
back?
they blocked my
Yeah,
number. So
blocked.
yeah, yeah. I
Block
think we're
sender, delete.
just kidding, guys. Just kidding. We love you. So look, we're talking a little bit about the music here, but we also want to get into the visual element of what was happening in this time, and this is a very special and unique set of circumstances for you personally. Long before you and I knew each other, an opportunity emerged, and as you've told me the stories, and I know you've only tip of the iceberg with what you've shared with me in terms of what happened, what unfolded in the entire experience. But why don't you kind of set this up a little bit for our listeners who don't know what am I actually referring to here, and then talk to me a little bit about how this whole thing was inspired, how it happened.
Okay, so I'm trying to remember it all because it's 16 years ago. But like I said, this album flattened me. So I was like back into Sammy big time. And I've always been a Satch fan as well, but like I was like big time back. So inspired as such that when I was in Cabo listening to the album, I'm like, so for people who may not know, I produce children's animation. I'm a producer and director in my daytime job. So I was working at one of Canada's largest animation studios, and I had access to a very high end piece of animation software that not many people had access to. So I'm like, wait a minute, here's an idea. I'm going to pitch an animated video and kind of flog the company that I work for and this, access to software that no one has. And I also had just watched I think it was the Beatles rock band animated video that just came out, the advertisement for that Beatles rock band album, which if you haven't seen it, it's insane. And it still looks amazing all this time later. And I sent that along as like, let's do something like this, which is honestly ridiculous that I sent that because it's so expensive that. But I didn't think they would know. I thought, and if we could even get close to that in any regard, we'd be happy. So I
So
sent
let
it
me
along.
let me pause you for a second here. So let's really give this the full on living it up, flip flops, tank top, cold beer, foot in the sand, staring out at the Sea of Cortez.
That's right.
This pitch that you made, what was that tipping point that you decided I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it in the setting I'm in right now, and share with our listeners where you actually were when all of this happened?
So exactly what you said. I was, nursing a tan or a burn or whatever from Cabo, and flip flops, and a beer in my hand, staring out at the Land's End, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to send an email to the website, to redrocker.com, and just see, sometimes you just have to ask. The worst that can happen is you never hear back, right? So I sent a very small, short email to the point saying, here's who I am. Here's a list of shows I've produced that you may have seen, like shows like Backyardigans. So listeners, if you have kids or grandkids, a lot of the shows from the mid 2000s I worked on and produced. So I kind of added, like, I'm not just somebody making stuff up. Like, I can deliver on something cool. And in animation, you can be any age you want. Right. So I did a couple of designs, and I wanted to copy Mike Mignola. For those of you who know who Hellboy is, I was going to go for a style like that. Anyway, so I sent off this email, and I hear back from this guy named this mysterious man with one name called Carter. So for listeners who know who Carter is, was instrumental in signing Sammy in his early days and produced his few of his first albums before he went off to be a super mogul at Capitol Records. And he pretty much is responsible single-handedly for reinstating Tina Turner's career in the mid-'80s. And then Sammy came back to him solo when he was solo, and enlisted Carter to kind of manage him on Chickenfoot. And he co-managed it with Satriani's manager at that time, Mick Brigden, who's an awesome guy. But anyway, I get an email from this guy named Carter, who responds and says, yes, let's talk further about this. So I quickly put together a pitch, and I was stoked. I was going to pitch it for Down the Drain, which was also insane because it's a super long song. And I realized how, animation could be expensive. But I also kind of picked a loose idea that I felt could translate to anything, just in case they changed their mind. Because by this point, by the time I pitched them, it was kind of at the end of the run. Like, they already had their videos out. So I'm like, I may have just missed it altogether. They respond. He says, meet me after the show in Toronto at the docks. So I was actually traveling in South America at that time, barely made it back to that show. I made it to that show like an hour from the airport, went right from the airport to that show, watched the show. I had to leave just before the end so I could make it to where they stayed at the hotel where you ended up meeting Sammy during the Balance era.
Yes.
He always stayed there, right, in Toronto. So I meet them there. I'm waiting in the lobby. An hour, and I'm sad I had to leave the last part of the show. I'm sitting there with my wife waiting. It's quiet. It's around midnight. There's nobody there. All of a sudden, this I think it was a stretched Hummer, shows up, and out runs Chad Smith, who begins to, air drum on everything and everyone in that lobby, and then disappear into the elevator. Satch comes walking in quietly. He's always quiet. Mikey wanders in, and then there's Sam, and then there's Carter. Carter sees me sitting there, waves me over. The rest of the band comes over, and they stand behind me. So I'm starting to get nervous and starting to shake. I'm trying to look at Carter in the eye and be professional. Meanwhile, my wife is talking to Sammy, and I'm like, I want to turn around. Anyways, I pitch him. I showed it. So by then I had like a little pitch deck, kind of some concept art I put together, and I said, we could do this, and I think we could do it pretty quickly. I have access to a software and a team who's had a little bit of a break in production, so it worked out perfectly, and we shook hands. So Carter was an awesome guy. So I didn't know much about him at that time. Over the course of doing this video together, because I produced it kind of through him. So I would send him stuff, he'd feed back to me, but really we just shook hands and off we went. So when it came out, they were very happy with it. And we started discussing what would become the sequel to it. So what happened, though, is that before we started doing the video, they said, well, we're not sure if it's going to be Down the Drain, because I think I made this for Down the Drain. But they said, you know what? I think we're going to go with Get It Up as the last single. And I said, well, good, thank you, because Down the Drain is just too long. But Get It Up would be great. And they said, what's the right duration for you? I said, well, something around 2 minutes would be perfect. So they went, and I swear, I'm going to convince Mike Fraser to remember this. They sent me two cuts, two edits of Get It Up. And they said, just choose one you think fits best with the storyboard that I had made. So I just dropped one over, didn't quite flow as good. Dropped the second one over, fit perfect. All right, Bo host Darin here, stepping in for a second to play the never before released second edit of Get It Up. The one that did not fit on the video just right. It's still pretty cool, but I think you can see when you compare it to the one that was used, this one just didn't flow quite as well. Check it out.
Hey, this is Eric Senich from the Van Halen News Desk. This is the Bogus Otis Show.
So now it went from Down the Drain to Get It Up. So we went off and we did that. We did that video together. And it went really well. And then through that, I got invited to the 20th anniversary of the Cabo Wabo Cantina because they wanted prints and artwork, which I gave stuff to Jorge. I met Sammy that night, and there was discussion of doing a follow-up video. Now, because at that point, Chickenfoot had kind of had its run, they were working on the second album. So I started kind of just throwing ideas back and forth. I wrote what we call in the industry a treatment to, again, picking ideas that could kind of fit with other songs very quickly in case they needed to switch it. So I wasn't too specific to lyrics. It could just drop over top of it and just play. So I wrote a bunch of ideas, and I did one they gave me some early sketches of Last Temptation, Bigfoot, and Different Devil. And I said, well, look, now I have some access to software that can do 3D. And if you remember back around the 2009, 10, 11, 3D, all the movies were coming out in 3D, and there's software that can turn something in 2D into 3D. And so I said, hey, look, I got some ideas where we can continue the kind of loose storyline from Get It Up. We can continue it into any song you want, but let's do it in CG. So instead of 2D animation, looks like drawings, we'll do CG animation. So I did some models of Sammy in CG. I made a spaceship that had the Chickenfoot logo, and I sent off a 3D render of a Chickenfoot looking ship flying into the sun. And they loved it. And then Carter died, which was very unfortunate. I didn't know. I was talking with him back and forth up until the night he died. And he obviously not going to share this information with me. But I was flabbergasted. I was just deeply saddened. It was so sad. And then it kind of just came to a halt. I just didn't hear from him because he had passed away. And I think they're obviously trying to find what happened. So then I got passed over to Mick Brigden. We kind of picked up the baton, but then they wanted to do a video for Bigfoot. And they kind of had a loose idea of what they wanted, which is about the band driving cars, each of them in their dream machines. They all love cars, right? So then I did another concept and a whole bunch of concept art, which I can share on our Facebook page and whatnot, about this giant sandstorm coming through the desert that where all these each band member is driving in a car until one point Sammy swerves off and runs Mikey into a cliff and he explodes and looks like he's dead. Only to have him reappear and drive up beside Sammy again. Like basically it's a non-ending Ready Player One video game where you never die.
Yes.
It kind of reveals that they're not going to die. And then at the end, we're interrupted by the band manager opening the door, live action, and the band would be sitting in their room, the green room, right, playing with 3/4 scale versions of the cars that we had just seen them animated driving. Point where they got busted like little kids.
Yeah.
Right, like showtime in 5 minutes, boys, and they put away their toys and off they go. So then that happened, but then they wanted animation takes forever. So they wanted that video super fast. And I said, well, look, in the time that you now want that, because we had a production schedule already, Mick had let me hear an early version of Bigfoot, so I dropped it on top of the storyboard. It was fitting perfectly, but unfortunately, they had something so great in their hands. They wanted to move up the release date, and I said, well, look, if there's one thing about animation, it doesn't go fast. So that was it. We didn't do the video for that, but some of those elements of those guys playing with cars and being interrupted actually ended up in the video where Mikey's playing with a car and he gets busted with playing with it, right? So that was funny to see that kind of end up there. But then what happened, I think they were so happy with the 3D test because I did this 3D render of the ship that would have been a sequel video to the Get It Up video, but in CG in outer space.
So there's some crazy history, our listeners, and there's a lot to unpack here. So let's zip and rewind. So show finishes in Toronto. You're up at the hotel that you've been asked to go and meet them at. So you're saying the entire band with Carter is basically standing behind
They're milling
you.
behind me.
Are they watching what you have on a laptop? Have you got printed?
I have a laptop
rendering?
and I'm caught up playing through some concept art. I think first of all they're kind of I'm not sure how much Carter had shared with the entire band, so I think they were just more curious as to really who's this guy and what are we looking at. So, but then my wife was sitting there talking to them, so they were just kind of milling about, not really paying attention to Carter and I. And then they just kind of looked at the art, and then he said, "Yeah, let's do this, right?" And then Sammy wanders upstairs, and we had a quick hello, but and then off I went to go make this video with an amazing team of artists, some of which who've gone on to work on fabulous places like Pixar and whatnot. But here's the funny thing: so every time now they came back through when they every time we'd have phone calls, whatever. Carter actually came back to Toronto and asked me to meet with him to give him an update on some of the development work I was doing, which would have been for the next video. And we met again at the Four Seasons. And as we're talking in the lobby again, so basically the lobby became like my office for these discussions, right? He takes a phone call and he's like, "Excuse me," he goes, "I have to take this." And he looked like it was somebody, I didn't know who it was. He didn't tell me, but his eyes were like, "This person, I must take the phone." I was assuming it's Sammy. He goes about 10 feet away. I'm sitting with my wife, just waiting. I can hear bits and pieces of the conversation. I think, and I would lay money that it was Jimmy Page looking for Sammy to join what would have been the rest of Led Zeppelin because Robert Plant did not want to continue after the 2007 reunion. And I could hear bits and pieces of Carter saying, "I think Sammy would be into that. And you sure Robert's out, right? You sure? Like, you sure Robert's out? Right?" So I just kept hearing, I said to my wife, I'm like, I think that's Jimmy Page on the phone or somebody connected to Zeppelin. So anyways, it was kind of a surreal conversation to hear what could have been Sammy working out something where he's joining Zeppelin for some sort of a tour or who knows. Anyways, crazy. Anyways, what happened was, so we did the video, came up pretty well, and I'm really sad that Carter had passed because he was a great guy, and in many ways, he gave me an awesome break for my career. And yeah, from that video, I started doing some more videos for people, uh, other bands here in Canada. In fact, one of Satriani's friends, a band, I'm not sure if our listeners in the States would know a band called Big Sugar, but he apparently is friends with Satriani, like best friends. And I hit him up, not knowing they were friends. He goes, "Wait a minute, you're the guy who did that thing for Satch." So it was very strange. But anyways, the video was cool. So
Cool.
I can share some of this artwork now that enough time has passed. There's some cool technology we used where to do it really quick. We came up with this technique where you take a paint. I had some really amazing background painters and artists, and we were sneaking the Chickenfoot logo as many places as we could. And this guy's an amazing painter. His name is Marco Bucci. So if you want to check him out on YouTube, he shows how to paint digitally. He's incredible. Anyways, he did these amazing paintings from the storyboard that I did. And then we use this technology in CG where you take a painting, a flat painting, you model out what it's going to be projected on, like a city, and you project the painting onto some really rudimentary 3D geometry. And it looks like a real city now. So it's quick and dirty. You can only get a certain limited camera move before it starts to fall apart completely. But we cut away before it starts falling apart. So some of the shots that you may see in the video that look like they are completely CG animated are actually just a painting
Painting.
projected onto a really rough looking bunch of blocks.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's kind
So
of cool.
in terms of the process from start to finish, um, concept to completed video, what sort of time frame did that all of that occur in?
It was pretty fast. It was about 3 months. Now, the good news is that I had a complete storyboard done. If you don't have a storyboard done, it can take an extra couple months. Well, you do a storyboard, you send it in. You know, Sammy and the band may have some feedback, but since I already had it, I think Carter just showed them and they just signed off and off. So that cut off a huge portion of time. We just cut all the back and forth. So we just went off and just basically painted it, and then I got a bunch of animators, and they just put it out really quick. Looking back, it was not as, it's 15, 16 years ago, and we are doing it pretty fast. So there's things, and again, I'm sure you're the same. You produce shows, and you look back, and whether it's animated or live action or live in front of your eyes, at the end of it, you're like, oh man, I could have done that part, could have been a little better. I could have spent a little. You're very critical of your own work, right? So when I look at it now, there's
Yeah.
parts I really like that hold up well, like the technology I explained, but there's other shots I'm like, could have spent a little bit longer there.
I think we all know that that we are exactly as you say. We're our own best and worst critic sometimes. So, I mean, to me, the little bit that I know about that world, and it's a very little bit, that's an incredibly aggressive timeline to be able to
It was
put
fast.
together. You know what was completed. Now, let me ask you, in that process, was there ever any point aside from what is, the early meeting that took place after the show in the hotel. Was there any part of this process where you had any direct communication with any members of the band? Was it always through Carter? And the kind of part B to that is, what's your sense of how much involvement did they actually have versus him as their manager, sort of being the de facto vote to put this together?
That's a great question, right? I mean, Carter was, I would talk to Carter almost daily and send him things or he'd send me ideas. So I think he was showing Sammy, but you don't just email Sammy stuff like this. That's why they have management. But I could sense that his notes were coming through Carter. But again, I think I had a lot of it already there. So he probably just
Mhm.
showed them all. I was like, hey, is everyone okay? Well, the first thing is like I did a couple rough drafts of what I thought the band should look like in animated form. And they seemed to like it. But then I thought, oh damn, we're gonna have to simplify it to speed up the animation process. So then I showed him another. I worked with another fantastic character designer who's, if you check the credits on many shows that many of our listeners, if you have kids or like animation, may know this guy. He's kind of a legend. His name's Brad Coombs. He did a quick pass over top of my designs to streamline them, but also brought them way closer on model, right? So I think Sammy signed off on those, so there wasn't any surprises as to what they look like because once it's done animation, you can't go back and change what they look like. So I had to get them to sign
Yeah.
off on that. And then I said, let's do something really cool. I said, at that time, Mikey had his signature Yamaha bass. And because Satch has such a signature guitar, I had the band send photos, or I had Carter send photos, like high res photos of their instruments. and I pulled those into the animation software and put those in the characters' hands because stuff with that much detail that looks so specific, it's better to use photos. So I just put those photos in their hands, which sped up the process a lot. Now I kind of shot myself in the foot because it went by so fast. A few months later, I get a phone call from Carter going, "Hey, Sammy wants you to do an animated video for Santa's Gone South for Christmas, and he needs it in a week." I'm like, nobody could animate anything that looks decent at all in a week. And I'm
Impossible.
and I'm not sure. I mean, I never heard this directly, but I kind of felt like they were like almost upset with me. Like, come on, man, what's wrong with you? Right? I'm like, dude, the process. It's not me. It's the process. Like, right?
Yeah. So the improvements in technology, the software for doing this kind of work, how much has that progressed in the last 15 or 16 years? And is there anything that would have made the process now more streamlined or any easier, or just simply just a higher evolution of the technology?
What's funny you mentioned the technology because it actually the Get It Up video actually was nominated for Canadian, I guess the Canadian version of an Emmy, which is up here in Canada. They're called Genies, not the Golden Toque Award. They're called
Take
Genies.
off.
Take off, you hoser. Uh, so it was nominated for Best Technical Achievement. So and there was a write up in Animation Magazine about it at the same time. And then right after that, it was funny. Right after that, the Chickenfoot appeared in Adult Swim animated form, but looking completely
Yes.
different. So maybe somebody else out there, another listener, hit them up with an animated pitch because I was like, that's weird. Where did that come from? It was almost exactly the same time, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, the technology has evolved. So to do what would have been the Bigfoot video in CG to the extent I had a whole production schedule and everything, it would have been probably half that time now because there's a process called rendering that takes where every frame is calculated on a computer. So every, beautiful avatar photoreal imagery can come out looking spectacular. It has to render and it can take 17 hours for one frame. So with nowadays the rendering power is just instant. So it would have been like half the time. So but I think we pulled off something pretty good for the time that it came out. But
There's no question. What project would you have loved to do in this vein that you did not have the opportunity to work with them on?
well, I'll share some of this artwork on our socials and stuff. But I did a whole bunch of concept art for what would have been the Bigfoot video. And when I heard that, I didn't know what the song was going to be. I just started making something that just looked visually epic, but didn't have too specific a storyline, so it could just be picked up and plopped onto another song. So I knew that specifically going in. Like if I got too specific or boarded out, which what could have been to a set of lyrics, and then that makes it restrictive. I couldn't actually just drop it on another song if they change their mind, like they did with "Get It Up" from Down the Drain.
Yes.
So the Bigfoot idea I made just about this giant epic sandstorm where these guys are racing through the desert. It's a video. The reveals that it's a video game. They're just killing each other in the most craziest ways until they get busted by their manager. Right, Showtime. So the visuals I had, there's a massive sandstorm with Satch playing. So the iconography that I had pulled together, I felt was pretty cool. But like I said, when they bumped up the release time, it was impossible to get it done.
Impossible to do.
So I
Yeah.
had a huge meeting
Now,
with Mick, and he said, like, he was like, "Ooh, it was E1. It was actually E1, right? That's the label they were on. So like E1 wants it right now because Chickenfoot, they debut went over so well for them. It sold a lot, right? Chickenfoot debuts went gold, which didn't happen for rock albums of people of that era at that time.
at that time, yeah,
No,
that's
that's
right.
what happened. It's actually the debut's fault for crushing the Bigfoot video.
Thank you, debut. Way to go.
Way to go.
Um, so you mentioned that as a bit of a bit of a thank you, a bit of a reward for the work that you had done. You received a very incredible invitation to go down to one of the birthday bashes. How was that experience? Sort of seeing what happens there. It's so just big and epic and unbelievable from a little bit of a different lens, being a little bit on the inside.
It was awesome, but actually I forgot now. But just before that, as Satch turned 50 on his solo tour, he was going through Canada, and Mick, who had now taken over from Carter, sadly after he passed, said, "Hey, we're coming through your neck of the woods. Do you want to meet and show us what you've got? And I can give you a sneak peek of Bigfoot, so maybe that you can merge them together." And he was turning 50 that day. Satch was that day, so I got to watch him do a whole bunch of. I have footage of him doing a whole bunch of AC/DC covers as a in a rehearsal, and then I showed him some stuff there. And then I said, "Hey, do you want to come down to the 20th anniversary Cantina birthday party?" Which was I got to meet. I sat beside Vinnie Paul, and he died not long after, right?
Hmm.
So I did a couple sketches, and I got his autograph on some drawings of mine because I was going to try to fit a whole bunch of Sammy's friends, and if we're going to pull off this animated video, put a bunch of his friends in there, right? So that's what I wish I could have done, but hey, things happen for a reason. But
Yeah.
it was a lot of fun, and I think like I guess the video is that's an ultimate testament to how much that album hit me because I was so inspired. That's how I came up with the idea. I'm like, I'm just going to email and ask him, right? Who's this schmuck? I'm just going to email and ask this guy out of the blue. And, I guess it's
From
how
the
you write the email. But I got through to Carter, right? And he was, I can't
from
say
the
he was such an
beach.
awesome guy. Yeah.
From the beach to the production studio is literally how it it happened,
And we're
right?
trying to get Carter's daughter on the show, right?
Yeah.
We've been talking about that. But I'm telling you, he was such a straight up. I mean, look, nowadays, he's old school, right? Like Sammy, like it was a handshake. Usually for animation productions, there's documents and all these things are signed and hundreds of meetings. It was basically we shook hands, and he just kind of we trust each other, and off we went. So he was a really cool guy, man. I remember I was really sad to hear when he passed. Right,
Yeah, I
good
think
guy.
Sammy makes a few mentions of him in his book, of course, and he's come up in conversation from time to time. I think there was, obviously an incredible respect there for the long history of that relationship, and as you say, very very sad, unfortunately,
Yeah,
his
and I do have
passing.
that second remix of "Get It Up," which for the 15th anniversary of this of the video, I was going to try to see if that other version would just drop over top of it because so much time had passed. I'm like, let's just see if the other, but like the same reason I chose the other version back then, that version just doesn't drop over top of the same, so it just didn't work. So I ditched it. But we have that. We can probably play it in this episode if people want to hear it. It's just a 2 minute version where they kind of do a lot of stitching of things, moving things around, so it won't sound like the version that we all know, right? But look, we talked about me, and I really appreciate we talk about the story. But look, I need to ask you before we close this, man. What is your consensus of this album? Do you have a favorite song? What was going on in your life at the time when this came out? How did it impact you at that time?
I think it's kind of back to where we started. It was just exciting to see something new, a return to something heavy, and I might actually say it was sort of my For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge in 2009 in many ways. It had the powerful punch to it, some smart lyrics. We've talked about Down the Drain many times.
Is that your favorite one on
Absolutely.
the album, Down the Drain?
I think it's probably right up there, if not maybe even um, tied with even like a soap on a rope, possibly. It was just so fun and fresh and
Dude, it's a killer
hard
album,
and
man. I mean, I
real.
forgot what's on here.
Yeah,
Like Learning to
yeah,
Fall, awesome. I like
yeah,
Turnin Left a lot too, right? That one's a great song.
yeah. Yeah, and they played on that tour. They played a little venue called the Mod Club in Toronto that was kind of up north of the downtown, since closed. Um, Lots of big shows taking place there. I mean, it
And that
was
was really like that's
basically
really small, right?
square room.
How'd you get in there? Like, was that for
There was,
sale?
yeah, they sold tickets for the show. There was maybe I'd say probably 1,000 people or so
Wow.
there, and they just absolutely blew the doors off of that place. And I still remember having a Corona at the bar across the street from the venue, and then going and getting in line to go in there that night. And we were fortunate enough to get up quite close,
Who'd you
and
go
it
with?
just
Who'd you go with?
There was actually four or five of us that went that are still in bits and pieces a group of guys and fans that I stay in communication with now. Um, and I just have such fun memories of that night
That must
and
have
of
been an
that
awesome
show.
show.
Just so looking forward to hearing the songs on that album be translated in the live setting and in a small little venue like that. It was pretty special. Yeah.
That's amazing, man. That's very. That
Yeah.
was a good stretch for Sammy back then, right? 2009 debut, 2011 Chickenfoot 3, and then he had the Rum. The Rum
Yeah.
was right on the heels of Chickenfoot 3.
Yep.
So there was a very active time. The book, his book.
Yeah, the book tour obviously
Yeah.
that took place. He was up here for Canadian Music Week and made several appearances. Actually, jumped up on stage with Bachman Turner during Canadian Music Week when he was in town for all of his appearances.
And you
And
went to that too, right?
I was there for that. He came on stage and played about three or four songs with Bachman Turner, which was yeah just super special. Let's fast forward now to present day, um, but I'm gonna draw a line back to 2009 and that Chickenfoot album again, and that is the Super Bowl has just taken place at the time of recording this episode. It was yesterday was the Super Bowl. A lot of chatter online about the halftime show. We posted again on our socials the great team that's putting a petition together to try and get Sammy in the halftime show performance slot.
From the feedback I found, it sounds like we should get him immediately, right?
I think they probably should have made this happen in the literal middle of the halftime show last night. But what this says to me is, what is the state of the world of rock music today? I mean, thank God for Mammoth, WVH, and Dirty Honey, and Extreme, and some of those bands that are still
Red
out
Voodoo.
there
Red Voodoo.
keeping it. Are the Red Voodoo guys out there in California just trying to build their career? They're trying to keep rock alive, and it wasn't that long ago, 2009, in this Chickenfoot record, but by the same token, it kind of seems like a lifetime.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, look, in many ways, when Kenny stepped in for Chad on the Chickenfoot 3, in many ways, we have that lineup right now under the banner of Best of All Worlds Band.
Well,
Uh,
you read my mind, and this is where I wanted to go just before we close the episode, and that is we know there's some new music on the horizon. We've seen some studio images. We've seen a couple of social posts. Mikey mentioned with his Christmas holiday message something about a little wink wink about some new Chickenfoot music there as he sat in front of his Christmas tree. So does it actually mean there is new Chickenfoot music on the horizon? And if so, how is it going to be the same, or how is it going to be different in today's era of how we define what is rock music?
well, is it just like take off the name of the band and just listen to what this album might be? Is it just, will it sound like Chickenfoot? Like, would this be Chickenfoot 4, otherwise called Best of All Worlds Band?
Yeah,
One?
absolutely. And maybe it is just back to the root of that album in 2009, and it is four guys mic'd up in a room, and let's play and let's capture some magic. Let's hope that's what's
Well, think
happening.
about it, right? Like, this was kind of the answer to Van Halen when they reformed with Roth in 2007. And now it's kind of another answer, or could be another answer to Van Halen now that Satch has spent, the entire summer playing Van Halen tunes, that maybe whatever he comes up with now will be even closer to that Van Halen vibe that Chickenfoot was kind of edging towards, right?
Yeah, I think that absolutely could be the case. Um, so last word to you here on what memory stands out as you think back to those times, those meetings, that work, everything that you did to put that project together and get that video produced, what's the single biggest memory from that whole experience that still stands out that you carry with you now?
I think it was just sitting in the lobby of the Four Seasons, and that when that stretched limo pulled up, I think it was a stretched Hummer. I swear to God. And they all came running out. I just felt like it was a surreal experience, and I had no idea where it was going to go, but it actually turned out quite well.
Hey, everybody, it's Eddie Trunk, and you're checking out the Bogus Otis Show.
After the phone call with Jimmy, which I firmly believe was Jimmy Page, obviously that didn't work out, but I think I
So hang on a second. We're gonna set this up. It's gonna be a little outtake. Let's do a little bonus outtake, okay? So season 5, episode 3, looking back on 16 years of Chickenfoot, we want to share a little bonus outtake snippet here, going back to the possible Jimmy Page phone call that took place in the Four Seasons Hotel.
Okay, so not long after that phone call, I believe in some back and forth I had with Carter, he asked me a few questions about what I thought of Sammy fronting Aerosmith. And I was like, what? Why would he ask? That's such a random left field question, right? But at that time, Aerosmith had kind of fallen apart, right? And it sounds like maybe also Sammy was being courted to maybe front Aerosmith. And then maybe during those discussions, obviously it didn't happen, and Steven Tyler came back. But also during that, when Aerosmith did reform in 2011, Sammy ended up opening a bunch of dates for Aerosmith.
That's correct. Yep.
So maybe during those discussions of him actually being in Aerosmith, well, Mr. Tyler took his break or whatever he was. Didn't he do the country album at that point? I can't remember. Who knows? Maybe Sammy would have released an Aerosmith album with him on lead vocals. And in an alternate universe, that would have been following up on him in a Zeppelin release.
So you want to talk about 2013 and Sammy Hagar and friends? That's a whole bunch of friends at the table right there.
Can you imagine? There's an album out there where Sammy's fronting Zeppelin, and there's maybe a stray Aerosmith sidebar with Sammy on lead vocals. We talk about blues in the last episode, right? There, imagine Sammy and Joe Perry. That would be an awesome combination too.
Tell us what you think of that, listeners. There you go.
Hi, this is Bob Bates, and if you really want to know about Sammy Hagar, you catch up with the Bogus Otis Show. If you don't, you might miss out.
What a stretch, man. What a great era of the band, right?
Yeah.
So maybe Best of All Worlds band will be kind of like the unofficial trilogy of Chickenfootish albums, maybe.
Best of All World Chickenfoot band. I don't know.
And we're going to have Mike Frazier back, right? He's going to come back on and talk more about the making of Chickenfoot.
Yeah, we're gonna see him again soon, and I think it won't be too long before we share some little snippets of your video work, and we talk about probably Chickenfoot 3 soon as well, just because it needs to have a light shone on it, absolutely. So thanks for sharing this story. This has kind of been a fun little walk down Chickenfoot memory lane, I think, and let's just close with this. I'll say I got a funky feeling somewhere in the past, still every day believing we're saving the best for last, and we are the Bohos out.
The Bogus Otis Show is produced by Right Now Entertainment. Hosted by Darin Bristow and Brent Kinnair. With audio and production assistance by Andrew Wright and Record Ready in association with Right Now Entertainment. What is understood need be discussed.
Sometimes you just need love. The Bogus Otis Show. Too fucking funny.